Cool. Well, Jim, you and I were talking, and this maybe we can kind of just jump right on into it, but give us an update first on what you're hearing about Fortify, and then we could segue into some of the FAQs and talk about those since we have Chip here. I don't know if we have Lee on as well, but maybe some technical FAQs that you're getting a lot that we can help everybody with.
Yeah. So just high level, the feedback has been really good. People are really happy that we're doing Fortify.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that first and foremost, like there's no question. We knew when we went down this road that this was something that people were asking for and wanted. I guess I'm even a little more surprised based on the responses we're getting, how pervasive that is and how many people really love the idea of Fortify. So we now have 170 partners that are using Fortify after 16 days of GA. And we're over 800 tenants on it. So we know that based on feedback, there's a few things that we want to iron out for folks. And I'll turn it over to Chip and Leron to elaborate on that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so we've been definitely getting very constructive feedback through the support channels, people coming up with questions that are having us take a look at the UI UX mostly, realizing that we need to do a better job of bringing forward information, mostly around the progress of recommended actions and how they're being applied. It's a lot more complex than I think. Well, we try to make the complex easy, right? We try to hide a lot of the complexity, but we're going to bring forward quite a bit more on the progress indicators, because I think there is a misconception, and this is our fault, that once the button is checked and the recommendation is sent to Microsoft, it's going to instantaneously be applied and instantaneously impact the secure score, and that's not the case. There can be significant delays in that. What we've seen is we've seen some actions that were initiated during our testing up to 21 days ago that still haven't reflected in the secure score, because they are waiting for additional configuration of individual users or other elements that have to occur in the background. We've also found a couple of situations that we can't explain. We were just reviewing one today in detail in our support environment, where one of the recommendations that is a SaaS alert specific recommendation, which collects together, I think, 7 different action items, policy changes in the Microsoft tenant. For one particular customer of one particular partner, it's just pausing without completing. And for almost everyone else, it's completing in a day or two. It does take a while for these things to happen. So we're going to bring forth a lot more information in the UI that's going to allow the partner to see the ongoing status and where the steps are. We're going to do that quite soon. But with that, I think Leron wants to take us through some detail, if you will. Maybe even share. I don't know, Leron, if you're planning on sharing any mock-ups of where we're going or not. Fine with me either way. But let's have you chime in.
Sure. So yeah, I want to share a couple of examples and then show you guys where we're going as far as improving the visibility and the insights. So I'm going to share my screen. And one common issue that we have had reported to us across multiple channels, and you guys should be seeing Microsoft Secure Score here.
We are.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So this is one example where we have this policy: only invited users should be automatically admitted to Teams meetings. So this is a very common sense one that we've seen a lot of partners apply across the board, and rightfully so. Now, I've seen a lot of support tickets come in and say, hey, this thing regressed on me and we didn't change anything. So, okay, we started kind of looking into it. And if you look at this one and you look at the history, I see that it just regressed and I don't see anything else. And this is the one that Chip was talking about before, where we just don't have the right amount of information. All I know is that this regressed. And then if I check in the settings, right, the specific setting is this one here, and we can check it because if we look at the implementation, it says who can bypass the lobby? People who were invited. So when we set this, the setting should be people who were invited. So we come in here, and I recently refreshed this, and you can see the setting is people in my org and guests. So how did this change back to, how did it change? So this is something that we are looking into, something that we are investigating, and we would very much love an explanation. And if anyone has any insight as to why this changed or where to go get this information as to what happened here, I would love to hear from you. But that is one particular aspect that we are looking into. So that's one example of something that we are investigating. Another example.
Yeah. Hey, Liron, let me stop you there for a second because Helen asked a relevant question. Shouldn't there be a log for it? And yes, Helen, there should be, but there isn't. And that's one of the problems. You know, when this was reported to us, you know, our initial reaction is, boy, this seems really weird. This is probably some kind of user error or some other administrator came in and changed it. But, you know, we take it seriously. So we dug into it and tried to reproduce it. And oddly enough, it does the exact same thing to us. It just spontaneously changed. It's like Microsoft has a gremlin in their own code related to this particular nuance of secure score in this policy setting. So we're going to have to spend some time digging into it. We'll have to do a lot more, you know, ABC scenario testing to try and understand how this happens. And we've also opened up a ticket with Microsoft to see if they can give us some insight and get to the bottom of it. But great question, Helen. Sorry, Liron.
No, thanks. I'm not able to read the chat. So if you do need to jump in, by all means do. So let's go take a look at another example. So as some of you may or may not be familiar with the anti-phishing policy. So we have this global policy that gets set here. And the way in this particular tenant, if you take a look, you'll see that we have priority. And this is important to understand because the way that these policies are applied is based on priority. And we've often had partners ask us, well, are you going to mess up anything that I've set in here already with Fortify? And the answer is no, because when we create the Fortify policy, we examine what was there before and create our policy as the next one down, right? So the first policy that gets applied is this lowest one. So this one is here by default by Microsoft. Then there is this 0 priority policy that gets set. And then Fortify comes in third here as 1. And then these two here, there's no priority. So they're not active. So then we look at the Fortify policy. And when I show you the designs and the mock-ups for what this is going to look like and what we plan, how we plan to improve this, it'll shed some light in terms of what's going on here. But if we take a look at this one, we've had a lot of partners ask our support team, really all of our team members, hey, I have this anti-phishing global policy. It's stuck in ongoing. What do we do with this? So we've investigated this. And the reason that it is failing is because we are attempting to, if a message is detected as a user impersonation, what we want this to do is to quarantine it. So the question is, okay, well, why isn't this happening? So if we go into edit actions, what we discovered is this is currently disabled. Okay, so then why is this disabled? Well, this is disabled because we have a setting that is here, where you basically have to apply the impersonation settings on a per user basis, and it is limited to 350. And Microsoft actually tells you, you should do this for your VIP type users. So then from our standpoint, we could do a select all here, but what happens if your Microsoft tenant has over 350 users? How do we know which ones to apply this to? If you add and remove users, we have to keep up with this. So what we've kind of uncovered here is this initial approach of select all, and like it's not going to work, right? So we have to go back to the drawing board and we have to figure out how to treat this type of situation.
This is awesome that you guys are getting to this level of detail and we get to be exposed to this. This is such great communication to customers.
It's music to my ears to hear you say that, because I was afraid I was going to put you all to sleep, and you guys know it's the last thing I want to do.
This is great.
That's never happened.
Never
Thank you,
happened.
Andy, for saying so.
No, this is, I mean, how many MSPs actually have this level of detail? And this is what SaaS Alerts is beginning to give us. In fact, this should be a report exception list that would be common areas where policies aren't being utilized properly with Microsoft 365 security.
Yeah, and look, like we just kind of discovered this morning. So this is all very, very new and fresh to us, right? As we get these support issues, we try to prioritize them and to aggregate them and to say, which of these things should we be examining in closer detail? So what we plan to do with this one, specifically the quarantine of the impersonated users, this one, is we plan to remove this from this global policy here. And we plan to make it independent in the short term while we figure out what to do. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want, right, Jim mentioned we have like 800 tenants connected. We don't want, and if this policy is applied across all 800 tenants, we don't want it sitting there and ongoing for you guys to stare at when we kind of have this problem that we have to come up with an elegant solution for that handles this, right? So one potential solution for us to hack around this, which we're not going to do, is, remember how I showed you I have to select out of the 350. We could select one user and that would satisfy this requirement. And then we could wash our hands of it and say, oh, good, we took care of it. But that's not the right thing to do from a security standpoint. The recommendation from a security standpoint is like, actually take a look at this. And the right way to handle this is to identify those at-risk accounts, the controller, the CFO, the CEO, those target accounts, and apply an extra layer of protection onto those. So that's what we need to figure out how to do and to do at scale. So in the short term, we're going to pull it out of this global policy.
Like Andy has his hand raised.
If I may, when we talked about having the ability to set a policy or a reapplying template, and could we have this also take effect if the account in this example, email account space is less than the maximum, to have it automatically apply to any new user account created?
You're talking about applying this setting based on specific rules?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me translate, Liron. What Andy's asking is, once we have this worked out and functioning again, can we, well, actually, even setting aside the rewrite, so to speak, of this particular set of collection of policies, will Fortify automatically apply policies to new users as they are attached to the domain? Correct, Andy? That's the question you're asking.
That's one aspect of it, no doubt.
Okay. So the answer to that is yes. So, no different than policies that are applied for all users in Microsoft, sort of natively, if you're using the Microsoft console. If the setting is that the account is that the policy is applied to all users, new users are also impacted by that.
Good, thank you. And the second aspect is, for those that have limitations imposed by Microsoft, if the organization is fewer than the count limited by Microsoft, that this could potentially be applied to all users.
Correct. And the way we'll reconstruct this in the user interface is we'll provide the ability for the partner to just have this automatically flow across all users. And when there's 351 users, we'll display the user list and force the partner to check.
Awesome.
That's a much longer term solution, as Liran said. And so our initial reaction to this is to pull this sub policy out of the global anti-phishing policy, make it a standalone policy. So we're moving it out of the collection. You'll still have access to it in Fortify, but you'll have to be, we'll give you guidance and tooltips to make it clear that you've got to be thoughtful about how this is applied. We'll tell you right off the bat, if you're trying to apply this to a tenant with more than 350, you need to do it in the Microsoft console until we get that rewrite done. Make sense?
Yep.
And we've always talked about how, and you guys have asked us, hey, can we configure these things? We want to be able to configure them. And the answer has always been, yes, we plan to do that. This here could be the very first step in allowing us to do that, because, right, in my view, one of the benefits of Fortify is you can apply a policy across 100 different organizations if you so choose to do that. But if you have to select individual users under certain conditions, to be able to do this at scale is now a little bit more challenging. So there's a lot of UI type challenges that we have to solve in order for us to give you a good solution for this, a solution that is viable, a solution that is not a hack of enable one of these guys so you can get the full score and let's move on with our lives. We do not want that.
Also, just to take this one step further, what happens if they don't have licensing for a specific setting, and that would also bring that back up a level to a licensing discussion for more complete security?
So we are already checking for licensing as part of this whole Fortify module. That's why you see in the report that it provides a couple of different options for modifying licensing and what that does to the secure score. So when you select a partner in the UI, a customer in the UI, we're only going to show you by default, we're only going to show you policy recommendations that are available to that customer right now based upon their current licensing. You do have the option of changing that and expanding the view, and you can see everything. And you'll only have the ability to apply what is available for their licensing. That's already built into how Fortify functions.
Totally with you on that. Where I'm going with this is that there might be, once we get beyond the licensing scope, there might be other applications that you could plug into Microsoft 365 that might deliver a similar service feature, and we could begin to customize this reporting out to those pieces. That would be helpful. We talked about, if I use like Mail Protector as an example here, that might be something that could be plugged in here outside of Microsoft licensing. Because I think at one point you were talking about adding a future generation of this or version of this product to be able to take third-party apps and bring that into this mix as well.
Yes,
correct.
That is very much part of. It's just a question of what are those third-party apps. And what does their native integration look like? All right, so let's talk about some solutions. So what have we learned? And I'm going to share. So this is very much in design, very much in active design. And one of the things that we started doing on the product side is kind of creating these big, bold questions or comments, which is, what are you going to do to my Microsoft tenant? Because when we look at the actions table, that is what we need to know. So we are going to, this is the information that is currently provided in a tooltip. We're going to provide it in a modal here, so there's more detail, and we're going to specifically enumerate the applied configurations that are going to be taking place. And we're going to be looking at adding a user impact section, right? So today we basically just get history. So we're going to add user impact, description, and applied configurations in order to answer the question, what are you going to do to my tenant? Let's go one step further. And okay, so this is the ongoing screen, and this is the screen where we have the most amount of questions. And the questions that we need to answer at this level are, why are these stuck and how do I fix it? So step one for us is to provide these progress bubbles. And what we've learned in working with Microsoft is that we have two different types of recommended actions. We have what we call simple, and the simple ones would be something like, this takes a while. This table takes a while from Microsoft. But we have simple configuration changes where this is a really simple one, right? If we look at the implementation, Microsoft just says, go here, turn this on, turn it off, and you're done. Right? Those are really simple for us to do. So for that one, the progress bubble would show you the recommended action's been applied. And the second bubble would actually show you that Microsoft has recognized that this is done. And you'll see I have a note here where this row would be completed. And the only reason that it's here is for our development team to kind of understand the progress bar progression. So we've talked about before how the top 3 reasons why something is going to be stuck here is, one, for whatever reason, Microsoft hasn't evaluated this. So we're going to tell you, yeah, the configuration's done. That's the first check mark. The second check mark is pending Microsoft verification. All right, and we need to clean up this text and make it better. But in some cases, it could take Microsoft up to 3 weeks. So this will hopefully give you a clear-cut sense of, hey, we're waiting for Microsoft to look at this thing. So that's the simple recommended action. Then we get into something a bit more complex, which we call complex. And in the Microsoft world, what does that look like? So here, enable MFA for all admin roles, right? So you go here and they give you a whole bunch of things that you can do in order to do this, setting conditional access policy. There's different ways to do this, but we set the policy in place. But then if we look at the implementation status, you can see that 13 out of 17 users are not registered and protected with MFA. So last week we talked about how even though the policy is in place, we're going to leave this in ongoing because we don't want to give anyone the impression that even though the policy is in place, the majority of you users aren't actually protected. So as far as we're concerned, this isn't done yet, right? So we've added the ability to undo and dismiss. So for instance, we have a break glass account, right? So 59 out of 60 users, or 3 out of 4 admins have MFA currently. The break glass will never have MFA, and we know that. So I would actually mark that as, I would resolve it as risk accepted, and I would add a note, and that note would say, yes, one account does not have MFA. It is the break glass. Break glass will never get MFA. So that's one example, right? And you'll see that I have this here. We've actually determined that it's not possible to do this. So it's going to look like this. So this is a 2-step recommended action. This is a 3-step. And if you hover over it, that same text I showed you guys before, in this case, you have 60 out of 60 users that don't have the sign-in risky policy turned on. And that answers the question, why are these stuck? So let's go take a look at what do we do next, right? How do I fix this? So how do I fix this is you'll click into one of these and the same information as before, except we're going to add this new status tab here. And on the status tab, you'll see that we also have the progress bar. It's a little bit enhanced and it's kind of hard to see with all of my notes and tooltips, but you can get a sense of what's happening here. Recommended action applied, the date time for that. Microsoft has recognized it. I don't know what to call this just yet, so I just put Microsoft Sync in here. And then next up is 25 out of 50 users are compliant. Then, right, the question that we need to answer is, how do I fix this and why are these stuck? So we see this guy's orange. So this is telling you that Microsoft last evaluated this score 10 days before 7/31, which is when this was applied. As a result, Microsoft has not yet counted this action as completed. So we're addressing the initial scenario. Another reason why something could get held up is because not all the users are fully compliant with this policy. This might be okay, but what we don't want to do as a software company is make the assumption that this is okay. So we're going to show you this here. down below, you can see the applied configurations. And we're going to give you a next step and potentially a link to a support knowledge base article that'll give you some additional information. But we very much want to give you what the next step is in order to deal with this type of situation. So for this one, we just have to wait. We'll be collecting data, so we should have a much better sense of how long these things take place, whether they just randomly, some of these are slow, or whether specific configurations are slower than others. And in this type of situation where some of your users don't have admin roles, don't have MFA, for example, we'll provide you next steps as to what to do with those. And in this case, right, it's if the policy is enforced, the next time the account signs in, they'll be forced to apply MFA. So we'll say something along those lines in the next step here. Any questions, thoughts, feedback, anything you guys want to share with us on this?
Yeah, we're open to ideas.
I think Andy had some in the chat. And do you want to speak to those? Do you want me to read them?
I was just suggesting one, if you added another tab that said potential compliance policy protocols that this would address, I think that'd be a great value add on your rec action title. I also said as a potential Microsoft point or where you had the status, say that that it's like an order confirmation, but it's a Microsoft, it has been acknowledged to be received by Microsoft as a pending policy enhancement. And I call that policy confirmation, I guess. And then thirdly was also addressing the issue with Microsoft pending resolution, so that it's still pending. So that was the thought process there.
So
So
totally,
Andy, one of those we've already discussed. Leron, can you jump over to one of your wireframes of ongoing?
yes. So this is ongoing.
Right. So on the left side there below the wireframe that Leron is currently working on, you see there's the slider bar, if you will, with the percentage. We're going to modify that so it represents where the score is today and where the currently ongoing policies are going to take the score. So that's going to address one of your points of what is this going to do to the score when it's all applied. But you'll only see that when we get back from Microsoft, what we call a 200 response, which means yes, command received and we have begun executing. When you see that, then we have enough information to modify that progress bar and add in, okay, here's where your score is going.
Chip,
Okay.
is it okay if I share my screen real quick? I want to see if this is different than the information you're getting back from Microsoft real quick.
Andrew, one last thing to mention. Andy, you talked about CIS. So we do plan to incorporate that into what we do. So in the short term, right, the first thing that we need to do is we need to clarify why these things are getting stuck and how to move them along so that we can help secure tenants. So in the short term, we're going to add some text here to explain how this fits in with a specific framework. But we do very much have plans to call out specific recommended actions and how they fit into specific frameworks.
Where I'm ultimately going with this is that part of compliance is producing artifacts or reports that support the assertions made, and to be able to create an artifact for Microsoft 365 that I could then put into a compliance document would be really helpful.
Yep. So that's the next thing that Chip asked me to do after we initially identify these things. Like first we have to map them to the compliance framework, right? That's the first step. Then once we have that done, we can actually produce the report that you're referring to.
Great.
All right, Andrew, you're up.
Yeah, let me just show something. So I'm going to plead ignorance here, Chip. If I could call on you, let me just share out my screen. Oh, here, Chrome. Okay, have you guys seen this?
I have not seen this actually.
Okay, here's why I want to show this to everybody. So just take a look at this. So the thought process would be, and let's just pick on MFA, and we'll talk through this as well as conditional access of MFA, because it'll kind of lead into where we were going today with the thought leadership. But if we don't get there, that's okay. But let's just hold this thought. Just quick show of hands, and maybe you can be my proxy, Michelle, because I can't see now that I'm sharing. Who would think that if you turn on MFA, it would change your secure score? I mean, it's certainly a very critical thing. Are most people saying yes in chat? Why yes for chat? You know, if 17 people don't have MFA on, right, should make a difference. Well, lo and behold, according to Microsoft, it provides you 0 points. So it's really interesting how Microsoft is looking at what increases your secure score and what doesn't increase your secure score. I think from Microsoft's perspective, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, I'm just going to spout off here. They're probably looking at, well, MFA should be ubiquitous.
Right.
And
it's table stakes.
Table stakes, therefore we're not going to give you any credit for it. Meanwhile, again, just shows you how clueless they are, because you guys have great data from the SaaS report. Jim, what's the percent again of people that have MFA enabled?
32%, Andrew.
Yeah. So this, I'm going to share this link with everybody because it goes into detail on how the score is created and why, you're like, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, if we do this, it's going to make a big difference, and all of a sudden 4 weeks later, the score hasn't changed. I don't want people to go, you know what I mean, with egg on our face, so to speak. So is this helpful at all, by the way?
I think it is, Andrew.
I want to tell you, Andrew, there could be a whole session on how Microsoft evaluates and how to communicate this to customers. This is very, very powerful. Additional best practices count as 0. What the heck is an additional best practice that shouldn't count?
What I find
like backups. How about backing up Office 365?
Well, I think that's why it's important, I guess, to even outline more of like an outside framework like CIS,
Correct.
because something like this is so hard to educate the customer on versus like the CIS framework, which is very clear cut. The secure score, they may change those metrics. Who knows when they're going to change them, right? I mean, it's like everything else.
Who's talking? I was just giving you kudos. I think you're spot on. Who is that?
Sean Mackey.
Okay. Sean?
Yep.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, great point. I mean, the irony of ironies here is, remediate vulnerabilities. Well, yeah, of course, but as we know from, all the threat reports of 2023, it's credentials, and yet you're getting no credential credit, for blocking the #1 threat to organization. So it's just kind of silly in which how Microsoft flips things over. And then the other thing that I find is ironic is and I was just going to ask anybody about the logging. Do you remember this? Because of when we talked about this, Chip, and you were really, very, you came on a cyber call, you talked about this from the storm incident, but this should be kicking in, right? This is the last day of August. Has anybody gotten any updates on logging, where that data is going to sit, how you're going to access it? Are you going to feed it into your SIM? Anybody hearing anything that might be a larger Microsoft customer? Or is this slipped into the sunset, like Microsoft? Oh, we forgot about that.
Yeah, this is Sean again. We're a direct CSP, and our partner manager has been completely silent.
Yeah, we were just talking about this yesterday. We being a bunch of us within SaaS Alerts, because one of the questions we're asking ourselves is, what impact is this going to have on us to improve our own reporting? So the biggest one that I want to know about is this going to give us access to MFA information for business basic and business standard, users, non-P1 users? Because right now, for some strange reason, Microsoft holds up reporting of the state unless you have a P1. So but we've heard nothing. It feels like this is one of those promises that Microsoft made that they think that they hope everyone forgets at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'm curious. That's exactly where my head just went, Chip, as I started to think about this. I'm like, because first of all, the again, yes, there's a big cost associated with this for Microsoft. Granted, they have the infrastructure to do it, but what's going to be really interesting, which is Leron, you had up last, which was the conditional access around MFA, which again is dovetailing into, if we get into what we're talking about today. Chip, I don't know if you remember with Bo, are they going to be talking about, oh, well, yes, you have MFA on for your main, for your computer, but the executive does not have MFA enabled on their phone. And hence that's the string a threat actor will often use, right? To change as they are trying to gain access, because now all of a sudden, if they change that string, that parameter, as they're quote unquote hacking into the environment, they don't need MFA anymore. And is that log going to get picked up? These are the most important in my mind for detection. Those are the really critical logs. And are we going to get those or not? Does that make sense?
It does, but I think it's an open question that we're all going to have to. This is one of those where we're in the movie theater waiting for the real show to start. And we don't know how long the previews are going to go.
Hey, Andrew.
Analogy,
I had a question for Andrew. On that last example you showed with the security score, I think that because MFA was already checked and it said completed, that there was no additional benefit that could be gained for that category.
That could be.
Is that what they meant by that?
Is that? Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, Helen? Is that Helen, by the way?
Yeah.
It's
Ann.
Ann, I'm sorry. I can't see. Defender. I apologize, guys. So yeah, so you know what? Here we go. My bad. So here are the scores. Here are the addition.
The other thing to keep in mind, when Microsoft says enable, they literally mean enable. So it means that your users are capable of doing it. And if you have 0 out of 100 users that have MFA turned on, I would expect a 0 out of that. Whereas if you had something like 90% of your users, I would expect a 90% score on the MFA situation.
So thanks for that, Ann. Sorry, and apologies, guys.
Exactly, Eric.
But this is still a great document to have access to, Andrew. Would you please share the link?
Yeah, absolutely. But what is really interesting is take a look at the 0 credits you get for, certain things around enhanced security. I still find this pretty interesting about you get no credit for. You know what I mean?
One other thing I want to toss in our experience, if you put one P1 license on the account, you can see the MFA status for the small business accounts.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
It's actually, the loophole goes further. You can actually enable all of the features as well.
Oh.
But as a direct CSP, Microsoft has warned us a few times about saying, hey, if you're in violation and we come back through in an audit, be prepared.
Okay, yeah, don't push it too far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But good point.
That's in there now for everybody to take a look at the scores and settings and calculations of how they do it.
That was worthwhile.
Yeah. So really interesting stuff. So Leron, back to you. I just wanted to share this because I thought it was so interesting about what you get credit for and what you don't get credit for, and or how much credit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was pretty much done in terms of our core mission and what it is that the entire Fortify team is driving at right now is to kind of remove the fog around some of these questions. And we're just going through these issues kind of one by one. We have kind of this mystery Microsoft Teams setting that is changing up on us and many other partners. We have to dig into that. And at the same time, we also have to provide additional visibility across the board with what is happening. Oh, I do have one more thing. Thank you for reminding me. And that one more thing is our what we call our global policies, which are a collection of bear with me while I get the screen share set up. We call them the global policies, which are a collection of recommended actions that we are applying kind of wholesale. And the reason that we do that is because of the interdependency between them. And those typically have a pretty high score impact, like what we're looking at here. These are global policies that I've kind of overwritten from a design standpoint. But that's another one that we currently do not get visibility into. So how are we going to fix that? So the way that we're going to fix that is by, and we went back and forth with the development team on this because of the level of, it was just kind of complex for us to show this. So we have this SaaS Alerts Fortify anti-phishing global policy. So today, the only thing you can really see is that it's stuck and ongoing. And in our fundamental question that we're asking all the time when designing this and working on this is, why are these stuck and how do I fix it? So we're going to establish this sub rows that are going to roll up to this row. And if you expand it, you're going to be able to see that these are the recommended actions and they're all good except for this one. What is wrong with this one? And the same level of detail that we showed when you drill into a recommended action here, we're going to give you that same level of detail when you drill into a sub recommended action of a group-based policy, right? So you could follow along with the progress bar that we give you in order to understand, how do I get full credit for this entire global policy? I saw that, Andy, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to ask, given that this is a policy, can I create a policy unique to a client and have it be a, quote, client policy versus a industry policy versus a global policy? In other words, it would be great to have that kind of definition available to me at the policy level.
So that's part of what templates will be about, Andy.
Yeah.
Is allowing you to create your own collections. We're actually going to change the verbiage here, by the way, and stop calling these global policies. There's too much overlap with the nomenclature of Active Directory itself. So we're going to call these policies instead, just to remove a little confusion.
You're cutting up a little bit, Chip, but if I'm understanding, we'd have policy elements that we could then formulate a unique policy for any individual organization or industry?
Correct. That's part of 1.1. That's templates.
Great.
And you'll be able to take any individual policy recommendation that's contained in Fortify, package it together with others. And we're going to do the really heavy lifting, which is to keep you out of the weeds, because there are some policies that are incompatible with one another. And we're going to make sure that when you try and drag an incompatible policy into a collection you're building, we're going to tell you and say, you can't do that, because of this, this, and this.
And you're going to have those all tied together with the different control frameworks, right? Like CIS, V8, NIST, 53, 72. We're going to do two things. We're going to include in the description, and Leon probably has a mock-up of it in here because we've discussed it. We're going to include the CIS control that is relevant for the particular recommendation that's being taken, the action that's being taken to approve the recommendation. And we're also going to build a report in our reports app that is pertinent to each individual customer, that lays out which policies have been applied to them and how they match up to the CIS framework. Yeah, but on the page that you were just on, you're talking about creating policy elements, right? Or like a template for, that we're building. Well, you already have pre-built templates or policy elements there where I can say, show me everything that is CIS V8?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Similar to Respond, we will have pre-built templates. And the very first one that we'll go after will be the CIS benchmark for securing 365. That's the first one that we'll lay in there.
I have a another question that comes up as it comes looking at Unify. Can you ever see us being able to extract information from Unify to fill into a overall cloud posture, compliance, security piece? I'm beginning to see that you guys are going to have access to a great deal of information that could be very helpful across multiple platforms.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question, Andy. You know, what we pulled from Unify today, or what Unify is all about, is pulling device information from the RMM, and its primary purpose is to allow you to reduce noise in SaaS alerts by using confirmation of devices. So I'm not quite clear on your question of where you're wanting to take it next.
So now we're beginning to establish a cloud security posture. Unify has the ability to pull devices and see if they meet also the criteria for a particular compliance standard. And you could potentially bring this together in a common framework within SaaS alerts.
Yeah. Now I understand your question. I'll only say one thing on this. Jim and I had a very, very interesting meeting on this topic earlier this week. And I'll leave it there.
Don't go too far, Tim.
Yeah.
What about beyond email, like edge hardening? You know, Microsoft Edge. You know, there are settings that you can get to, and if you're making changes here, why not make the next logical jump?
It's a perfectly good and logical question, and it's something we actually talked about in a few weeks ago in a separate SASE call, that whether or not we should be looking at beginning to harden the browser, since that is the interface to all SaaS apps. And I think the universal consensus was that, you know, the partner, the group or attends this partner calls agrees with us that that's part of our mission.
Thank you.
It just comes down to a matter of priority. So the way that we're tackling these things up until now, and I'd love your input on this, is we're getting these recommended actions. And when we built this, we had access to 4 Microsoft tenants with licensing levels from free Azure AD all the way to, I believe, E5. And we looked at as many recommended actions as we could, and we basically worked our way down the list in terms of what's going to give you the most points. And that's been our approach thus far. But all along, it's always been, well, should we be securing Azure servers? No, we don't really think so. Not yet anyway. And this edge question, I think, is a very good one. And we'll look to you guys, the community, and tell us, hey, that we need to go there right after this. And we built this in such a way that we can add more of these fairly quickly.
Well, I would only say this. It's pretty clear to me that you're building a compliance platform based around the monitoring of the Office 365 tenant. But if you're not going to do the compliance from the workstation, from the physical device up, then I still have to go buy another product to do it. And if you're doing all of these actions, it seems logical that you would just move the dial, or, you know, expand the funnel a little bit to start picking up other, you know, compliance related issues. To me, you know, browsers, and not just Edge, Chrome, Firefox, you name it, you know, would be natural targets, you know, to expand upon, because they all affect everything. They all touch everything. And then, you know, once you get all that done, you know, where you go or how you choose to expand that funnel, I think is anyone's guess. But you could start looking at application, I mean, how many times do we see applications that you don't want on the machine, or applications that you have to hope that, Cyber CNS or some other, funky, wonderful product, tries to update. So just
Yeah. No, and look, it's a great thought. It's conversations that we're having. It's questions about whether or not we do it ourselves or whether we partner with someone and integrate on that. End of the day, like, most of you probably know that, we're still only 2.5 years into this. 2.5 years ago, we had one module, we monitored 25 events.
Yep.
Today, we're well over 250 events. We've got 3 modules plus unified functionality plus Fortify functionality. Like, we'd love to give everyone everything all at once, but realistically, we have to take things in bite-sized pieces.
Unless we triple the size of the dev team, Jim.
Which I'm asked quite a bit all the time, and
Well,
unfortunately,
if everyone that attends this call weekly would agree to a $10 per seat price point, we could triple the size of the dev team.
yeah.
Hey, Chip, there's an alternative to this, by the way, and that is to just get with the RMM people and say, we're making tremendous inroads here. And this would be a great way to have them leverage you and you leverage them and keep your dev team small and get better and tighter integration with the RMMs.
We do have terrific relationships with them, Andy. I'm not sure if Adam is on a call. Adam runs our MSP tools. Literally, we call it a division in-house. It's that important to us. And he's built fantastic relationships with the RMMs and the PSAs and IT Glue and, all of the MSP tools that we cover. So we do work with them closely, and we take this kind of feedback to them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just getting them to do a lot of the heavy lifting on that flip side of this and just push it back to you, or vice versa. You push to them if it's compliance manager or something else.
Mm-hmm.
But I see more and more moving to the cloud, and your value proposition is going to continue to increase.
Yeah.
Great discussions for Right of Boom, Andrew.
Yeah, I know. This is just this constant content, right, Andrew? One of the things I know, Andrew, we're not going to be able to devote the time that we wanted to the other topics, so we're going to have to push that next week. That being said, I just want to highlight a couple additional things. So, Andy, you had mentioned, Helen mentioned in a comment, like, thank you for the transparency in these calls. That is our intention. That's why we do this. We want to provide as much value as you possibly can for all of you. Just a reminder, like, I know we got a lot of people recording this, taking notes, whatever. We trust this group to keep everything within the confines of this group. So if you're participating in this call, I just want to remind you that, we're as open as we are because we trust you. And we hope that trust is not misplaced. I would also want to clarify something. So for those that have Reddit accounts or follow Reddit, there's a string going around about alluding to the fact that SaaS search is now forcing people into 3-year deals. For those that know and have been paying attention, that is not the case. I want to clear up any misinformation that may be out there, which is we're offering our partners the opportunity to lock in their price point for 3 years. It's your choice and your choice alone whether or not you want to do a 1-year option with us or a 3-year option. Obviously, the 3-year option has a lot of financial benefits to it. You're locking into all the innovation that we come up with, for the next 3 years. So some people find value in that, some people don't. But that's some stuff going around Reddit right now. And if you're a supporter of ours and you have a Reddit account and you feel compelled to weigh in, we certainly won't stop you, and we'd appreciate that as well. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those things, Andrew.
No, I appreciate it, Jim. You guys are doing a great job, and I think it's really cool to see in the number one area in which threat actors are attacking that you guys are taking, the care with the community and the efforts you're doing. So it's fantastic, and you're hearing.
Andrew, it's funny. One of the comments on Reddit today was, "We love SaaS alerts. We love the product. We just wish there was more of a community around it." So I don't know how someone that belongs to SaaS alerts as a partner doesn't know about these SaaS MSP calls. But my head almost, blew off my shoulders when I read that one.
Oh, well, yeah.
We just got to keep, spreading the word.
Yeah, sounds like it. And that maybe next week we can address the proxy IP address, because I think it's really good. It's important. It's something that's proliferating tremendously. We talked about it this week on the cyber call, but we'll pick it up next week, and maybe just a yes or no. Have you guys seen and or read about the proliferation of these proxy services that are offering threat actors residential IPs? So if you think about how threat actors are working right now, their number one route is through access brokers buying credentials. And if they think about combining that effort with these proxy services of logging in with something that is from an IP address that is now local, they are, obfuscating many of the ways in which we look to detect them. So, have you guys heard about some of this stuff going on? And
No,
if
this would be great to post in the chat for us to prep for next week.
well, that would steal a lot of the thunder. So, but you can do. There's a bunch of research on it, but we'll talk about it. Also, I can share the links. I think, in fact, Michelle has the links.
I was going to say, Andrew, I think it just is more, it's an extreme extenuation of kind of the living off the land attacks that you see from attackers now, that they're moving more towards, IPs that are not going to hit the radar, and more, I think, about what Chip and the team at SaaS Alerts, their vision is for behavior monitoring. Watching that behavior is going to get more and more critical on what people are doing, not necessarily where they're coming from.
And IoT as well.
Amen, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah, this one is so troubling because as many of you on this call have commented in the past, and we get a lot of feedback from the broader partner community about geolocation and all of its problems. And this one just exacerbates that problem, makes the geolocation information even less valuable. It's bad enough that it's not very accurate. So this is a troubling one. I'm looking forward to this conversation next week. We should dive into it pretty deeply.
Yeah.
Andrew, I was just going to say too that, we got so many people that now want, like Gary Pica's like, I've heard about your SaaS MSP calls. He wants to join one of our calls coming up too.
That'd be great to have him.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So I know we're at the top. Great turnout, Jim. So
yeah, we were at 61 today, I think. So all good. Thank you everyone for your continuous feedback and participation in these calls. It's very much appreciated.
thanks, guys.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.